Hello, this is Photography Gamer. Welcome back to the channel. Today I am reviewing The Last of Us Remastered Edition. The Last of Us Remastered Edition is an action-adventure game developed by Naughty Dog. So what is The Last of Us? You play as Joel, who is just a regular guy living with his daughter Sarah. The story starts just as an outbreak has started, and it turns people into aggressive zombie-like creatures, and basically the whole social system collapses. It's a very good prologue, and it really sets the tone perfectly as it deals with the main tragedy of the story for Joel and how he has to deal with that at a later time in his life, and how the story develops, and with that being the kind of the beginning point. After the prologue, the game fast forwards about 20 years into the future, and you basically carry on the journey with Joel, but now it's set in a very different world. The game world is fairly linear. It's got some small open world sections, but they're generally quite narrow. It's always leading you down a fairly narrow pathway to the next set piece or objective. The story unfolds over 4 seasons, which breaks down the narrative progression into clean chunks, and that really helps. It makes it more concise, and it's much more well packaged in terms of delivering the narrative. Basically, Joel ends up meeting a young girl called Ellie, and he has to help her find a group called the Fireflies. To what end, I won't say, as the story in this game is the best part, so I won't ruin that for people who haven't actually played it. So the game, it's an adventure game of sorts, with very violent and visceral combat. It's kind of like a road trip where the two main characters have to get somewhere, and so it's not necessarily about where they're going, it's about how they get there. It's about how that journey changes them and how the people affect them, the people they meet, how it changes their relationship with each other and with others they encounter along the way. You go to an area and you have to find your way through it together, so fighting off raiders, fighting off the infected, figuring out how to traverse some of the landscapes. So it's all about kind of teamwork really. And that's pretty much the same for every level in the game. It doesn't have a lot of kind of variety. It's very sort of similar level by level. The combat is very powerful and intense. It's a very violent game, and it's very realistic in terms of the melee combat in particular. You really feel like you're hitting someone or shooting them. There is a real weight to the blow, or the actual shot from the gun. It's very well done in that respect. It makes it feel real. Saying that, stealth is actually the most common approach, as enemies can be very difficult, so you do have to pick your fights carefully, and your approach will dictate how tough the situation becomes. Patience and stealth will definitely reap rewards, but sometimes things will just go off and chaos will ensue, and then that's where the ultra violence will come in. There are crafting options in the game, but they are all in real time. Joel and Ellie can put their backpacks on the floor and they can use the things they've found to make medikits, weapons, etc. You can level up various skills with pills. You can find these littered throughout the environments in the game, so you can choose what kind of skills you'd rather have depending on your play style. The narrative in this game is fantastic, and it deals with human relationships in such a mature and tactile way. It's unlike any other game in that regard. It's more like a movie, to be honest. The dynamic between Joel and Ellie is always interesting, and it's fascinating to watch their relationship develop throughout the horrific and traumatizing events of the game. The character animations are very smooth and realistic, especially during combat. They really feel like real fights, and the way the graphics convey the violence is very striking and very impactful. The level environments are all post-apocalyptic in style, very damaged, very distressed visually. It's got a really beautiful art style, and it definitely captures that sense of what the world would look like if everything just went to hell. There is a photo mode in the game. At first glance, it's quite limited compared to the more modern releases, but if you stick with it and you experiment, you can create some really nice photographs, but it does take you out of the action. So I'd recommend don't necessarily use photo mode a lot on your first playthrough. I'd say just enjoy the experience first time round. Then once you've completed it, play through it a second time and then just take pictures all the way, because you don't want to lose the impact of the story, because this game is all about the resonance of the story. The The sound in this game is really spectacular. The ambient sounds, the sound effects, the guns, the distance sounds, they all really help you feel like you're really there. But the two parts of the sound that are just unbelievably good are the music and the voice acting. The voice acting is superb. It's on a par with any major film release you can care to choose. All the actors deliver their lines perfectly, and the narrative is so rich and detailed and complex. It's just a wonderful thing to observe and immerse yourself into. The music is by Gustavo Santaolalla, who is an Argentine musical composer. Anyone who knows his work will know what to expect. It's beautiful, emotional, rich and detailed. It's such an amazing score. It's honestly the best game soundtrack I've ever heard. It's just really beautiful, beautiful music. Okay, so what's good about the game? The story is one of, if not the best of any game I've ever played. The script writing is sensational. The voice acting is amazing. The cutscenes are interesting and as good as any film I've seen. The music is amazing. The combat is intense. It handles the complexities of human relationships in a mature way that's more in keeping with cinema than gaming. So it's a benchmark for gaming in terms of telling a story about human emotions and relationships. Okay, so what's bad about the game? The gameplay can get a little repetitive after a while. It would have been nice to have some more choices at some points in the game, as the whole narrative and gameplay, it's very, very linear. I guess that is also part of its strength, but still, some freedom of expression would have been appreciated. I feel like that would have made the experience even better, because you would have had a little bit more time to digest the really rich narrative and the intense combat. The relentless combat can get a little bit tiring. It would have been nice if there had been more open world sections, just to give you a breather, just to break it up a little bit, because the violence can get a little bit too much at times. So what do I think? I think The Last of Us is a benchmark game. It sets a standard in terms of narrative, in terms of storytelling, in terms of script writing, in terms of the musical score. It handles human emotions, human relationships, and how we deal with trauma in a mature way. So in that regard, it's a 10 out of 10 game. In terms of actual gameplay, it doesn't reach those heights. It's an enjoyable experience to play it, but I feel the game is more about the story than the actual gameplay itself. The gameplay is solid rather than spectacular. It doesn't really innovate in the same way that the narrative does, but I'm sure when the sequel eventually comes out, they will address the gameplay and give it more freedom of expression and variety to give the game player a little bit more space. So who should buy this game? If you enjoy a good story about how people deal with loss, how people deal with evolving relationships, how people deal with trauma in an apocalyptic world, then you will love this game. It's a game for grown-ups, made by grown-ups. The story is beautifully handled and beautifully told. If you like adventure games that are dangerous and bleak and full of complex situations physically and emotionally, then you'll enjoy this experience. So what is the score out of 10? So I remember the first time I played this game, I'd heard all the hype, all the expectations were so high for me. And the first time I enjoyed it. I thought it was a beautifully crafted story wrapped around a good, solid game. Then recently I played the game again and I enjoyed it more this time. I think this time I didn't have the weight of over expectation on my shoulders and I just played it and enjoyed it. It's a fantastic game. It's a seminal game in terms of storytelling and narrative. It's not an innovative game in terms of the actual gameplay. It's solid gameplay and it's a good game to play, but it's not a groundbreaking game like a Horizon Zero Dawn, for example, in terms of gameplay. But this game sets the standard for storytelling, it sets the standard for script writing, for narrative, for emotional development of characters and human interaction and how trauma affects us all. So with that in mind, my score for The Last of Us Remastered is 8.5 out of 10. It's a game we all should play, but don't go into it with unrealistic expectations of the actual gameplay being the best of all time. The gameplay is good, the story is amazing. A AAA classic, but you have to also realise that the narrative outweighs the gameplay. So if you prefer more story than gameplay, this is for you. That doesn't mean the gameplay is not good, It could have been more varied and interesting, but it's still a fantastic game to play and I definitely enjoyed it. Okay, that was The Last of Us Remastered. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please subscribe, click on the bell. I hope everybody has a great day. This is Photography Gamer, signing off. Thank you.